The following position is from the game of Daniil Dubov against Leinier Dominguez, played on day 6 of the Global Chess League in Dubai. It's white to play, and what do you think is the best way to continue? And I'm not going to give you the answer yet. We will go through the entire game. I will show you how the attack unfolded, and definitely this is some position you have to spend a bit of time yourself. Can you find the winning continuation? It's very exciting and we will get to see absolute drama. So stay tuned, and then we are going to the starting position. Dubov played here the move 1 e4, e5, and now interesting decision d4. E takes d4, knight f3, knight c6. So by transposition we have the Scotch opening. Knight takes d4, knight f6. And now very interesting moment as moves like knight c3 to protect the pawn or trading off the knights on c6 are by far the two most common options. But what does Dubov? He's doing Dubov things, and he has his own idea as he played here the move bishop b5, just developing a bishop, ignoring the pawn on e4. And probably he was inspired by a game played by Jordan van Foreest. And remember, the Dutchman, together with Dubov, was part of the second team of seconds for the World Championship matches of Magnus Carlsen. What is the idea? I'm not entirely sure. Black is able to take the pawn on e4, but probably white is just going to castle and aim for very quick development, trying to exploit that knight on e4. The king is still in the center. Very interesting stuff. Has never been really seen at high level. However, Dominguez goes his own way. He plays bishop c5, which is a safe developing move, attacking the knight on d4 with both the knight and the bishop. So black now will have to move its bishop again because white goes knight b3, bishop goes to b6, knight c3, castling, standard developing type of play. And you know, these sort of structures, they are very often seen from different 1 e4, e5 openings. White is having a small space advantage and therefore probably the slightly better prospects. But black is rock solid. Bishop g5, and if white were allowed to play one more move, he would go knight d5, increasing the pressure on the knight, which is pinned. So therefore black has to anticipate the potential threat against the knight on f6. h6, attacking the bishop, bishop h4, knight e5, with the idea to swing over with the knight to g6. And now if white would play knight d5, even g5, unpinning the knight on f6 is an excellent defensive resource. Black is in good shape and will go for the exchange of knights next. So that was not played, and what Dubov does is very interesting. As he goes here for the move king h1, he is planning to get the f-pawn involved. The pawn wants to go to f4, and that's not possible when the king is still on g1. Black goes knight g6, attacking the bishop on h4, and now white would like to speed up things. He doesn't want to drop back with the bishop. That enables black to consolidate its position, but bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and now very interesting move, f4. So now the pawns on e4 and f4, they are quite nicely placed, and white is looking for ways to initiate an attack. Of course, the pawn on f4 cannot be taken here because of g3, and the knight is pinned on f4. Therefore, c6 was played, and now we do get to see a very slow phase of the game. White goes bishop d3, bishop does support the pawn on e4, black goes queen h4, and now white thinks, let's just kick the queen out with g3, queen g4, and black would be very delighted to see the exchange of queens happening, so that the rooks will be connected, and that's rock solid position. White is intending to keep the queens on the board because white has a lot of attacking ideas. Rook d8, bishop e2, questioning the queen, and the queen decides to go back to d7. Rook ad1, white brings its remaining piece into the game, and now queen e8. So the pawn on d6 is well supported by the rook, and very soon, hopefully, the bishop can be released, for instance, to h3. Now, bishop h5 played in the game with ideas of weakening the black kingside structure, maybe with bishop takes g6, doubling the pawn. So black decides to drop back with a knight to f8. Queen to g2. And now you may think, what's the idea? It's prophylactical move, preventing the bishop from getting developed to an active square. And now black goes knight h7. The knight is not doing well on f8, so it comes to f6. Bishop f3. Bishop has done its job. Now it comes back to overprotect the pawn on e4. Queen e7. Knight e4. The knight on b3 comes closer to the center. Bishop d7. Now finally black's rooks are connected. And what should white do next? Well, that's a very good question. Dubov has quite some creative ideas. He would love to push the pawns, but whenever you make a pawn push, it also gives away squares to the black pieces. So white is very patient. Plays here the move rook d3. I think this is a nice classy move with ideas of either doubling on the d-file, or who knows, maybe at some point there can be a rook lift along the third rank in case white is launching an attack. Rook e8. And now white plays a very interesting move, g4. So what's the idea? We get the pawn involved, and black goes rook 88. Maybe that's not the most precise move, as white has the option to go knight f5. Let's say if you go knight f5, bishop takes f5, g takes f5, then the g file is open and white is trying to get some attack going by getting the rooks over. Now, if we go back one move, we understand knight f5 is an interesting move. Maybe black could have considered preventing it with the move g6. I don't think it's a really weakening move, but it was not played. So let's see, rook 88 is still playable, of course. Queen g3 played. Now black decided to drop back with the bishop to c8. The bishop was standing in the way of the rook. Now pawn is nicely protected one more time. And now knight f5 played anyway. So we do get this exact structure we briefly discussed already. Bishop takes f5 and now g takes f5. It's very important that the center is closed. There's no way for black to generate counterplay with its major pieces, and white will look for ways to start attacking the pawn on g7. Knight f6, rook d2. So this is, in hindsight, a better square for the rook to come over to the g file. Queen f8, anticipating potential mating threat, rook g2. So now at least mate has been covered on g7. King h8, getting out of potential pin on the g file. Queen h4, excellent move. And you see that black cannot do too much. If you ever play d5, then white is going to respond with e5. And this pawn block is having a very big impact on the course of the game. Black, running out of useful moves, played here a5. Not an impressive idea at all. White cannot really double the rooks on the g file because of that bishop. So on one hand, you would love to attack, but if it's not possible, keep your options open, try to be flexible. And rook e1 is played, as now white is about to push the pawn to e5. And it would be great if the f-pawns can be undoubled. Black goes bishop d4, so that the bishop covers the e5 square. And now knight e2. Excellent idea. This is a pawn sacrifice, as the pawn on b2 can be taken. Was not played by Dominguez, but let's have a look. If you take on b2, then the big difference is that the bishop is no longer guarding the g1 square. First, we try to force the bishop to go to an inferior square. We are attacking it. Bishop got to go to a3. And now rook b2 g1 with a lot of attacking ideas against the pawn on g7. So for instance, if you play here knight takes e4, the key idea is to take with the bishop, rook takes, and now, boom, rook takes g7, removing the key pawn. If you don't do anything, it's mate on h6, while if you take on g7 with the queen, hoping that you can get queen versus two rooks, but there's queen takes d8 with check first, and on the next move, you capture the queen. It's absolutely game over. So this pawn on b2 is poisoned. The bishop got to stay on this diagonal. Bishop went back to b6, and now the knight comes into g3. Once again, overprotecting the pawn on e4. I think the knight is much better off on g3 than it was on c3. Rook d7, rook ge2, and now both sides are trying to focus on the center. White has doubled on the e file, black has done the same. But look, e5 can be played here, and this is a really powerful move. D takes e5, f takes e5. The knight is under pressure, and if the knight goes away, it went to d7 to attack the pawn on e5. Now, fantastic pawn break. e5, e6, not giving black the chance to take on e5. This is very important because we are attacking the knight. If you would take on e6, which was not played, the main idea now is to get the bishop to h5, attacking the rook. Now the rook will have to move, otherwise you lose the exchange. Now the rook can go to various squares. Let's say it goes to a8. I put it far away. You will understand why I put it there. Rook takes e6 is played. We have the idea to take on e7. Black, in order to avoid the loss of material immediately, should take on e6, but now the f-pawn is becoming an e-pawn, attacking the knight on d7. Knight got to go away, and then it's e7. And now you see, if I could have gone with my rook to d8, for instance, but then the rook would have been under threat as well. Now it's only the queen under threat. It's queen g8, but it's game over because of a beautiful tactical shot, which was definitely seen by both players. Now we eliminate the main defender of the passed pawn, the knight on f6, with a queen sacrifice. G takes f6, now we get a new queen. And after rook takes e8, you win the queen back thanks to the skewer. As after queen takes e8, it's bishop takes e8, and white is a full piece up in the remaining endgame. Let's go back, but this is a very typical line, and you see the importance of the placement of white's pieces. The rooks backing the pawns on the e-file, and the queen also looking for ways to join the attack. Now, in the game, black didn't take on e6, played knight f6. And now, interesting moment, because black is still holding on. What to do? I think makes a lot of sense. Try to eliminate that knight on f6. So, knight h5 could be a very nice move, with the point that if you take the pawn on e6, well, there is the move knight f4, and there will be a massive fork on g6. So that will be game over. If you do take the knight instead, then the bishop comes again to h5. This looks absolutely crushing. Was not played in the game, once again. Instead, bishop h5 was played right away. Also very strong because you pin the pawn on f7 and you're about to win a pawn or even more material. So knight takes h5, knight takes h5, and look at how impressively white has managed to advance its pawns. Now, the big threat, for instance, could be something like f6, opening up the king side with a devastating attack. So black decided to take on e6, and now anyway, rather than just capturing on e6, we play the move f6 with a threat to take the rook, as well as f takes g7 with an attack against both the queen and king. G takes f6, and now we are reaching the critical moment of the game. Lot of things are happening. White has sacrificed two pawns, but black's king is open. In the game, a very logical move, knight takes f6, was played, but it's not the best. What should have white done instead? Try to infiltrate with the rook on g6. Now, if you do that with rook g2, let's say you go rook f7, even knight f4 would be a very nice idea. Intending knight g6 and even rook g6 is an idea. King h7 may be considered, but after queen h5, black cannot really use its extra pawns. The major pieces are stuck behind their own pawns. If you go rook g7, there is rook takes. If you take with a queen, then the rook on e8 is hanging. That's not possible. If you take with a king, it's knight takes e6 with another huge knight fork. Black is forced to give up the exchange, but that is absolutely game over. So that would have been a very nice line, but Dubov falls for the tempting option. He plays knight takes f6 with an idea to attack the rook. Now, if the rook would go away, the attack will still go on, but he definitely overlooked the following counter response. Rook to f7, with the point that the rook on e8 cannot be taken because of rook f1 with check. After rook takes f1, it's queen takes f1 with checkmate. Impressive counter. Of course, that's the drawback when you start advancing your own pawns in front of your king. If you get countered, you can be checkmated immediately. Should be said also that after rook f1, you don't have to take the rook. You can go king g2, but then it's queen f3 with checkmate. Didn't happen in the game. Instead, white went for the move rook takes e6, which is also looking very sensible, because now after exchanging one pair of rooks, white is now intending to give a check on e8 if the queen moves, and that could lead to checkmate. If the queen stays on f8, it will be a loss of a queen anyway. And look, that knight on f6 is fantastically supported by both the queen and the rook. So this is a powerful attack. But there is the move queen g7, excellent defensive idea with counter threat on g1. Now, rook e8, check, can still be met by rook f8, and black is holding on. The rook is protected as well as the pawn on h6. So this doesn't lead anywhere. In the game, there followed the move knight to g4. Very understandable to close the g file. At the moment, there's no mating threat on g1, and white has ideas to take on h6, for instance. Rook f1 played, king g2, and now rook f2 check. The knight cannot take the rook because of the pin along the g file. If you go king g3, which was played in the game, now we reach a very important moment, and black was getting lower and lower on time. This is an incredibly sharp position, and it looks as if black is in deep trouble, because look, this king is wide open, but there are hardly any good checks. If you play bishop c7, there is king takes f2, for instance. And what should black do? Move the rook away. Probably rook f5 is the best move. I think this is incredibly difficult to spot, but very soon you will understand why this move is so great. After rook takes h6, king g8, at least for the moment, all the threats have been covered. Black is still in the game despite being a pawn down. Now let's see what happened in the game as Dominguez went for the move king to g8. Very understandable to anticipate rook takes h6 with a devastating mating threat. It would have come with check. Now the big problem is that the king is very unstable on g8, not being covered by a pawn, and this is exactly the position I showed you at the start of this video. Now the big question is, what would you play with white? One more time to think for yourself. The best move was not played by Daniil Dubov, but it's a beautiful, silent move, quiet move, queen h5. What's the idea? Very simple. You would love to set up a skewer with your rook. Rook g6 is in the air. The king cannot really escape. If it goes back to the h file, you can take with the rook on h6 the pawn. If the king goes to the other side, it's going to be checkmate on e8. So that doesn't work either. The alternative could be to launch a counterattack with queen c7. But now after king h3, it's all over with the fun. There are no more any good checks. And look at the black king. It's lacking the support of its own pawns and pieces. So there are too many threats like queen g6, rook e8 and so on. This is crushing. Was not seen in the game. Now let's have a look what happened in fact. As after king g8, queen h5 was not played, but instead there followed the move rook to e7. Very understandable. You're attacking the queen. And what is black going to do? Dominguez was thinking and thinking, played here the move rook f7, but was not in time to press the clock in time. So he just lost on time. What an incredible drama in this game. And the position, how to evaluate it? Well, it's not clear at all. It seems to me that black is still trying to hold the position. After, let's say, rooks are getting swapped, you can take with the king. It's a sharp endgame with queen and bishop versus queen and knight. You can take the pawn on h6. Looks as if you're winning a pawn, but then the pawn on b2 can be taken as well. So absolutely dramatic end of the game. It's not something you would expect at the highest level, especially considering that the players play with an increment. But these things happen when you're under pressure, and I think Dubov totally deserved to win this game. He is the one who built up the attack, had the space advantage, directed its own pieces into the direction of the black king, exerted a lot of pressure and created threats. Then, okay, the opponent eventually succumbs to the pressure. So I thought this was a very enjoyable attack with a dramatic finish of the game. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back tomorrow with day 7 of the Global Chess League. See you then.